Hello, welcome back to my channel. After last week reading 5 books in 5/6 days, depending on whether you count it as 24 hours or actual days, I got a fairly easy challenge of reading 2, both of them by Lucy Jane Wood, so again we're going with a single author. Lucy Jane Wood was actually at MCM Comic Con in October, so I have actually met her and watched the panel she was on, which is about witch stuff, but I can't really remember what she said about it that much. As in, they were talking about what the magic systems were in all of their worlds, but there were 6 people on stage, I think, and I can't remember what was hers. I can only really remember Laura Stevens, to be honest. I know this is a cozy fantasy, and I know there's some sort of magic in baking, I think, or at least there is in the second one, Uncharmed, but I'm not sure. I actually got this one basically when it came out, partially because it's got a Waterstone signed exclusive edition with this gorgeous sprayed edge. Look at the kitty, it's so cute. And partially just because I knew I was going to love this, even though I haven't read it yet. When I mentioned this to Lucy Jane Wood, she said, "That's a lot of pressure, I really hope you enjoy them." So yeah. This has a nice sprayed edge as well. This is from the Works, exclusive edition from the Works, which made it £6, by the way. I've been looking at this in stores for months on end, being like, no, I can't justify it. And then £6 in the Works, £6 in the Works with this. I couldn't really resist. Well, actually, I did resist for one day, and then I got it the next day. The Forbidden Planet MCM also did have this house thing in a cardboard cutout. I'll put a photo here that was really kind of cool. And I don't fully know what this is about. I'm pretty sure they're both romances. This one, it says it's time for her to rediscover her magic, and it's called Rewitched. So I'm pretty sure she's basically just stopped using her magic, and then she starts using it again because she falls in love or something. I'm not entirely sure. I believe Lucy Jane Wood was one of the people who said that she was influenced by Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and that is why they point to do their magic, but I could be getting her mixed up with someone else. Multiple of them mentioned Sabrina the Teenage Witch as influence or inspiration for how they did magic in their worlds, as well as other 90s, it was basically 90s witch stuff that was the inspiration. I have just realised that there's actually some pen marks on the back of here, which is quite upsetting. I already was aware that there's this gash down the middle, which, I mean, you can't see it on the camera, so you know it's not that bad, but it is annoying to have something like that on a book that I've not only not read yet, but I bought it with it on without realising. So that's a little upsetting. Anyway, I have been really excited for this. I have got this one signed, of course. That's why I talked to Lucy Jane Wood and stuff. And I was looking around just now being like, oh, I need to find a bookmark for this. But I've actually got a bookmark in it already, which is at MCM when you're going to get a book signed. Someone comes up the queue, and asks you to, how you're spelling the name, what you want it signed to, and you get a little card with your name on it. I don't know why I'm covering it up. Everyone knows my name, but, just in case. Anyway, I am rambling and I'm really excited, so I am going to get started. Okay, the thing with these books over the 5 that I read last week is that I wasn't sure how long these were going to take me. I've just been reading for about 20 minutes and I've read 20 pages. So I'm back to my regular about a page a minute. And considering there are 422 pages in this means it will probably take me about 7 hours to read, which isn't too bad, except for the fact that I've got lots of streaming plans this week. So I'm not sure how long I'll be able to actually read for, and that's what makes this a challenge this week, that is arguably more of a challenge than last week's, even though last week's was more books. Anyway, as I said, I'm 20 pages in, so I've got 402 to go, But I am loving it so far. She works in a bookshop, which I did know but I had forgotten. I'm pretty sure in Uncharmed the main character works in a bakery, which is also sort of shown on the front. I mean, so's this. You can see the books just about. We've met the person whom I am assuming is going to be the love interest. I actually thought that about someone else as well, so it's possible that it could be the other person, but I am excited to find out. Basically, she's never met another witch other than her family members, and the people who basically seem to unlock her magic at age 15, which is sort of where Sabrina the Teenage Witch comes in, I guess, because she only finds out when she's 16, if I remember correctly, and that's when she can start to do magic. I'd also forgotten the main character's full name, which is very romantasy, and I don't know if this is romantasy or fantasy romance. I can never remember the difference, but it is very romantasy name. There's actually a comic skit that I've watched multiple times that's basically the heroine in every romantasy, and one of the bits of the skit is about the names that are often there. I think she's called something like Lyra Moonstone. This one isn't quite as bad as that. I mean, that's hyperbole, exaggerated and stuff. But she is Belladonna Blackthorn. It's BB as well and everything, and I'm not making fun of it. I love it. It's just so, like, on point for the characters and stuff. But tropes are tropes for a reason, and it's not even that big of a trope. It's not that big of a deal. She's called Belle. I also actually really like the name Belle, and I like the name of another character in here, which is Violet. So I'm sort of loving the whole name thing. If you've watched lots of my videos, you'll know that I have a whole thing about names, basically. I think probably a lot of writers do. It's just sort of, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's just my etymology. I never remember how to pronounce that. Fun as well, because I like looking up origin of words and origins of names, and I like choosing names for characters based on the origin of them and stuff like that. And I am starting to ramble, so I will stop, but I am thoroughly enjoying this. I probably won't do another check-in. I'll probably just talk about it once I finished it, which will presumably be the same time I'm starting Uncharmed, but we will see. And yes, I'm very much rambling. It's the enjoyment, okay? It's the enjoyment and the autism. They're combining, and now here's ramble. And I can still continue to do it. Okay, I will... later. Before I say anything, apologies for the wet hair. I can't just poof it dry like a witch. Honest. In case one obvious, I've finished it. There are actually only 405 pages in this. The 422 is at the end of the sneak preview of the next book, which, considering I'm about to read that, I didn't read the sneak preview. This means it took me only 411 minutes or 6.85 hours as opposed to the 7 I expected. So, similar but not quite. Just slightly more than 1 page a minute. No, slightly more than 1 minute a page. And I am very glad to have Uncharmed as well, because I did enjoy this thoroughly, and as I knew I would, and I just want to stay curled up in this world. I actually think I might have enjoyed this more than I thought I would, which is saying quite a lot. I think I was expecting it to be more like other trendy books that I've read, where the story is good, but the writing is a bit meh. You know, nothing special, not bad, not good, just meh. Right near the beginning of this, it felt a little C.S. Lewis, a little Roald Dahl, in a way that I feel like maybe Lucy Jane Woods grew up reading them, but the style is entirely her own, with just a hint of influence. Or maybe it's just a British style. I haven't read many British books recently. I will read the first 2 lines and maybe you'll get what I mean. Or maybe it will just be me. Which will always sense that she is in the presence of another born of magical persuasion. Before any introductions are made, before any actual magic is displayed, she will subconsciously register their arrival for herself. And then there's some more information going on, but I don't want to read too much because I feel like that would be just me reading the book, and I'm not going to do that. But maybe it shined through a little bit there, or maybe it's when you read more of the paragraph that it sort of tickles. If you've read this, let me know if you had that feeling, or can look back and be like, oh yeah, that is kind of like that. Or, you know, if it's just me reading into things, I've already mentioned how much I love the names in this book and that she was influenced by Sabrina the Teenage Witch, if I'm remembering the panels correctly, and I can see hints of that and some others in the book, but the magic system in this is vast and as a whole, probably unlike anything I've read before. It feels a little like someone asked, what witches are they? What kind of magic do they do? And she simply answered, yes, but not in a way that feels cluttered. I am a tiny bit apprehensive about the next one. They're standalone set in the same world, so I'm wondering whether it will be explained all over again and how it will be done in a way as succinct as it was in this, or whether I was right to specifically read this one first, as it won't be as explained in this one. Which I sort of hope, but I understand if it's not. Just as the magic system is distinct from other works, the characters are all distinct from one another as well, which is something that's actually quite difficult to do, and especially with the amount of characters in the story. Not that there are a vast amount, I'm using vast quite a lot, but it's not tiny either. I know in last week's video I talked about how very similar the characters in the different books by Emily McIntyre were, but I mean compared to books in general, not specifically them. One of the characters does conform a little to a trope that I've been seeing a lot, but it's not the only thing about him, and he doesn't seem strictly adhered to it. He's tall, dark-haired, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, especially after last week's video, that he's described as smelling of wood and spice. For those who didn't watch last week's video, I mentioned how characters in books seem to be smelling of sandalwood, citrus, and some kind of spice. So yes, this goes with the trope, but this book is extremely autumnal and those scents are associated with autumn, so I think it's more to do with that than anything else. When I say extremely autumnal, I mean it. This book takes place almost entirely in October. It mentions the leaves constantly, there's hot chocolate and pumpkins, and it's simply impossible to forget that that's when it's set. I've seen that in total there are 4 books planned for this series, including the 2 already out, so I am curious to see if they're all set in different seasons. Uncharmed totally looks like it could be set in spring, as they wouldn't necessarily have to be in order. Perhaps a little bit of Easter going on in the way that this one was a little Halloween-y. But I don't know. It just feels a little spring to me. When it comes to mistakes, there are a few of the usual speech marks, being in the wrong places, that seem to come in almost every book. It's something I noticed a lot growing up as well, so it's not a new thing. It's just a thing that happens. And I don't hold it against any book with that in because it is far too common to do so, as well as the fact that it's not to do with the author at all. I have been very tired while I've been reading this entire book, so it's entirely possible I missed some mistakes, and it's possible the one I think I did find wasn't one. There's a bit where she puts her hand over her mouth, then her other hand on top of it, and then a few paragraphs later it mentions that she's clutching some items tightly in one of her hands, as if we should know they're there. I looked back and I couldn't find the bit where she's holding them, but also, I mean, maybe she's, but I don't know. There's also one other smaller bit where she's sighing with her eyes closed, then a moment later she's engaging in eye contact with someone, but I dismissed that as her having only closed her eyes for the sigh. It's a little ambiguous, but not necessarily a mistake. On the predictability scale, I'll probably put it about a 5 out of 10. I honestly don't know what I'm basing this scale on, but it was mostly predictable, and bits I didn't get, I can clearly remember things that lead up to it which others might get, so perhaps it should even be higher than a 5, I'm not sure. You definitely want a cosy book to be predictable. Like when you watch a rom-com, you don't want them to end up not being together, right? It's that sort of, not that this is a rom-com, obviously, but anything cosy that you want to just put on or read and not necessarily not think about it too much, but just chill, complete chill. Something a little bit predictable can be good. This is also finally a book that I expected to not have spice that actually doesn't have spice. Huzzah! It's been a difficult year. I think I mentioned earlier that I wasn't sure whether this was a fantasy romance or a romantasy, and it's definitely not a romantasy. It is a cozy fantasy with some romance included. I could see it being viewed as a fantasy romance, but not a romantasy. It's around mid-stakes and none of this is anything beyond what's on the back of the book. Belle, along with still working at the bookshop and hiding her magic from basically all of those around her, has to work on said magic for a trial or risk losing her magic forever. During this book, I laughed once so loud that all the attention in the room was immediately drawn to me. Thank goodness I wasn't in public. I almost cried and I got goosebumps all over at different points, of course. I constantly say that for a book to be a 5-star, I have to want to start rereading it again straight from the beginning. And while I didn't have that, I also did reread some of it straight away. And I think the main thing that's not making me want to reread it is that I have Uncharmed waiting for me. I still get to go back to that world. So I'm giving it a 5-star. It was sweet, it was explorative, and it was exactly what I wanted in this book. Speaking of Uncharmed, I have been waiting all day to be able to read it. So I really want to get into it now. I've now officially finished both of Lucy Jane Wood's books. With Uncharmed, I'm going to start at the beginning. Within the first few pages, I was hit with the fact that the main character, Andromeda Wildwood, Annie for short, seems to have autism, or is she's autistic coded, at least. Now, I'm obviously going to explain why I feel this way, but I want to say, 1, I'm not saying it's the author's intention for Annie to be autistic, and 2, just because someone has some or even all of these things I'm going to say about Annie doesn't mean the person necessarily has autism. And I know that. I'm simply saying these things made me feel like the character might. One of the first things is that she has a signature colour. Not everyone who does has autism, of course, but I feel like the majority of people I know that do have either autism, ADHD, or both. It also happens to be pink, same as Elwood's in Legally Blonde, and there's a whole Tumblr post about how she's autistic coded. Annie's an anxious people pleaser, which is not exclusive to autism, but that is what the book basically revolves around. And there's a quote I have, one moment please. There's a quote I have about just the way she was in social situations, tightly wound and second-guessing her responses, reflecting on all the ways that she'd embarrassed herself as soon as she got home. There's another one later on about her sticking to her strict weekly schedule as well, and there's another bit where she, or at least more than one bit, that she doesn't notice sarcasm and things like that. I basically felt that about it 30 pages in, and it didn't let up. If anything, I just got more into the fact that, yeah, this seems like she might have autism. Again, I'm not saying it's necessarily written that way, and you're welcome to disagree with me. That's just how I feel. She also has a spell she uses daily to help with it, which could be an allegory for medication, especially with how it's described later on in the book, which obviously, spoilers, I can't say. But as far as the actual story goes, Annie is living her perfect little life, working at her bakery, having weekly social meets with her group, and enduring the odd blind date. Then the Coven call upon her to help with this newly discovered witch. So she's 15 years old because that's when witchy powers start in this world. And this newly discovered witch is having trouble with her powers. She keeps setting things on fire and stuff like that without intending to. And she just needs some help. And Annie is apparently the witch for the job. The first is meant to meet up every week or so. I'm not sure on how frequently it's meant to be. But then it basically snowballs into the Coven saying, here's a cabin in the woods, go live there, sort this out. Here I'm not sure how much I can say without giving too much away, especially since I'm rating it a 6 out of 10 on the predictability scale. Again, just like Rewitched, it's a cosy fantasy read. You want it to be predictable. It's not remotely a bad thing that it is predictable. It could be a 10 out of 10 and still be good, which is a weird way of saying 10 out of 10, still be good. It could be entirely predictable and still be good. One thing I will say about this is that it's actually set before Rewitched. Although there aren't many character crossovers, as I've said, they're both standalones, merely set in the same world. It's not mentioned how long before Rewitched that Uncharmed is set, but it is also set in autumn. I suspect they all will be, especially with the next one coming out in September, which is a weird thing to say in November. It's once again set almost exclusively in October, so I have a feeling that's going to be the case for all 4 of them. There's more people smelling like wood and a specific spice, but that's not all the scent is described as. And just like Rewitched, it's autumnal, and that's probably the reason for those scents, and I wouldn't expect anything else. Overall, this took me 407 minutes or 6.78 hours to read its 403 pages, which is a little bit quicker than I read Rewitched. and overall I think I like it more. As someone with anxiety disorders, I connected with Belle, but as someone with autism, I connected with Annie more, even if my signature colour is purple and not pink. In case it wasn't obvious, this is also a 5 stars for me. I didn't see any mistakes in this one other than the odd punctuation mistakes, which I think were fewer than in Rewitched. Lucy Jane Wood's wonderful writing style is just as cosy in Uncharmed, and there is one thing that isn't really a criticism, but I could see it annoying some people. There's a word that I don't hear used a lot, but it does appear frequently in both these books. Not like every page, but for a word I don't hear that often, it's reasonably frequent. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just something I noticed, and maybe other people hear it more frequently than I do. Needless to say, I'm very much looking forward to the next book. If you're wondering which order to read these two in, as Uncharmed does happen first, but Rewitched was published first, I don't think it matters, but I would suggest reading in publication order if you have a choice. There's just a tiny something that is a nice nod to something in Rewitched, but you won't get it without reading that first. The magic system explained just as well in each though, so you shouldn't have a problem going the other way around. These copies I have were actually also really easy to read, and it was so much fun seeing how far I'd read through the cat on both of them. Ow, I just hit myself in the face with a hardback. But reading through the cat was really fun. In a little show of like, oh, I'm this way through the cat, etc. On and on through the entire book. Anyway, I have to go plan my Annie cosplay now. I don't actually know how much I'm joking with that. It is tempting. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like if you did and subscribe if you want to see more. Maybe you'll see me in the next one. Until then, bye.